I think it'll be money laundering for me and not for thee kind of thing.
Over the last few weeks, the DOGE effort has begun to uncover not only how massive the waste, fraud, and abuse is, but also the extent at which DC politicians and too many obstinate bureaucrats have coordinated to create what is essentially the largest money laundering scheme in history.
$4.7 trillion worth of federal payments were, and I'm using their words, untraceable.
And also a lot of people that use those, privacy enhancing protocols and products aren't money launderers. They just don't like mass surveillance.
$1 trillion was stolen. 70% of that money went overseas.
What has that money ultimately led to, and who was ultimately responsible for that pump and dump rug pull, wealth transfer, arguably, type of operation? It definitely would facilitate this type of bad behavior that we know intelligence agencies have engaged in with the past.
The largest money laundering scheme in history has just been exposed by DOGE, and Whitney Webb sounds the alarm of what we can expect in the days and weeks ahead. The Department of Government Efficiency has just uncovered over $1 trillion through fraud and waste, and this is only the beginning. Whitney discusses the plan by the elites, who've been working behind the scenes to set up a global monetary system, and why most people are in for a rude awakening. She warns that the major players at the top do not have your best interests in mind at all. Webb exposes the ulterior motives for Larry Fink, Jamie Dimon, and other major banking giants. The control the elites are attempting to take over Bitcoin, stablecoins, and a huge majority of financial assets is unprecedented. And Whitney sounds the alarm on what's happening right now and why this is unlike anything we've seen in history. Let's get right into the video with Whitney Webb as she gives her prediction for what's coming in the days and weeks ahead. Drop your comments down below and subscribe if you enjoy the content we do here.
Which again was part of the, early ideology common among people in the Bitcoin space. And so, the idea that there was this, that it was going to challenge fiat and bring more financial fairness to the world and end our debt-based monetary system and put us on a hard money standard and all of this, a lot of that has sort of gone out of the window, and the idea of, Bitcoin, sort of use it as a new petrodollar analog. You want to play with Bitcoin, you need dollars. And really any sort of digital dollar that the U.S. ultimately approves, which is very likely in the Trump administration. At his speech at the Bitcoin conference last year, said no CBDCs, but was very bullish on stablecoins, on dollar stablecoins, which are a major purchaser of U.S. treasuries, for example, and help service the U.S. debt. And if you combine that with a lot of his bullishness on Bitcoin, the talks of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, for example, I think it's very possible that we could see this type of digital dollar paradigm that Tether really helped start. And I think people that are particularly in the Bitcoin space, which has often been sort of flooded at times with the opinion that Tether is a Bitcoin company, should consider that, especially when a lot of the rhetoric and ideology around Bitcoin was about stopping the debt slavery system and the debt-based monetary system. Do people really want to perpetuate that? And is it really conducive to financial freedom and banking the unbanked? And I think a lot of people have, including in the Bitcoin space, have become very obsessed with the number go up mentality and are not really interested in the ideology that helped popularize it among certain demographics. And personally, I think my interest in Bitcoin, it's the only cryptocurrency that I see as really having any value. I mean, I would say that it really depends on where things go from here and the extreme interest of, the traditional financial system and the U.S. government, which the ideology of Bitcoin was opposed originally to working with those two entities and sought to, supplant them because they are bad. That kind of is the original part of the original Bitcoin ethos that has been sort of shed in favor of mass adoption and the idea that holders of Bitcoin will become extremely wealthy, and the concern and the idea about having freedom money or privacy money and all of that has sort of definitely taken a back burner and may disappear entirely from the discourse. And I personally don't see that as positive. I think if, we're going to move into the digital money space and there's, this push to eliminate cash, I think anonymity and privacy is important. The argument is that, well, bad people will use it to money launder and all of this stuff. And sure, that's true. But even if we go into a new digital system, I really doubt that the CIA and some of these other entities that engage in that same type of behavior will be forced to stop. I think it'll be money laundering for me and not for thee kind of thing. And also a lot of people that use those, privacy enhancing protocols and products aren't money launderers. They just don't like mass surveillance. And I think, people that hold Bitcoin, that care about that ethos still need to think about, if their bags get pumped, what will they do with that money to preserve financial freedom? Because I don't think the U.S. government or, BlackRock or some of these other entities that have become very bullish on Bitcoin are interested in protecting privacy or having Bitcoin be used for freedom money necessarily, And so I think that stuff personally to me matters, and is one of the reasons that I've, tried to speak to people in the Bitcoin space for some time, because I think a lot of those people do care about the ethos, but I think there is sort of an effort to flood the zone, if you will, with this idea that it doesn't matter anymore, and that we should sort of, surrender that ethos in favor of, becoming extremely wealthy.
Webb foresees a looming economic catastrophe driven by collapsing fiat money systems, rampant inflation, and bank failures. She suggests transitioning to a Bitcoin standard might be on the horizon as the world grapples with the impending crisis. She asserts that the promises made by the Federal Reserve and central banks have been hollow, leading to excessive money printing and a proliferation of poor investments. And with the aftermath of the recent inflation surge, Webb says this will not lead to a return to the status quo.
And that is going to be persuasive for a lot of people, especially when we're potentially facing a debt crisis and an economic downturn. And, historically, that type of, drastic wealth increase for people can be very persuasive and getting them to change their ideology. But I would argue that, the direction the world is going, it's important to think about what we can do to preserve freedom. And, if you're expecting to have a major increase and your ability to finance things, maybe consider financing things that help ensure privacy and help ensure financial freedom, and ensure that Bitcoin could become freedom money and not just a strategic asset for a few very powerful people.
Let me ask you, so wrapping this up in a bow, we've got a lot happening in the world at the international level. There's a lot of optimism about Trump coming into office right now. As you look at his executive orders, what do they signal to you?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I've been working on wrapping up a piece. So I haven't paid ultra close attention to the executive orders that he has put out. But so, and I'm sorry, I can't comment on those at this time. But some of my reporting in the lead up to his inauguration and also during the campaign, as it related to, the Trump camp in particular, are some of his connections to these big tech figures that we talked about earlier, whether it's Elon Musk or figures that are, also part of the so-called PayPal mafia, David Sachs being the crypto NAA czar, for example, and someone like JD Vance having relatively close proximity to Peter Thiel, someone at a top HHS position, Jim O'Neill, also very close to Peter Thiel, who has, I would argue, wildly different views than Robert F. Kennedy, who's supposed to lead HHS, especially in terms of deregulation, biotech, and mRNA technology. What are these things ultimately going to result in? And I would, consider people to consider those connections, and also consider that there's a high likelihood, just like in the first term, that there will be a lot of, deregulation in over the next 4 years. And I'm sure a lot of people will be happy about that. But I think some people that voted for Trump may not be, particularly in the Make America Healthy Again movement, where deregulation at the FDA, for example, could result in a flooding of the market with mRNA products. which are very controversial with a significant segment of Trump's base, for example. Or, when Trump was in office the first time, he deregulated biotech and agriculture pretty significantly. A lot of people in that same Make America Healthy Again movement are not really into, a proliferation of GMO crops in the food supply, for example, and sort of finger them as a causative agent in the chronic disease epidemic that MAHA, that particular movement, was really based around. And I would, I think a lot has been said by myself and also by others about sort of, people have probably noticed Palantir stock performance. I think it's very likely that over the next 4 years, Palantir will become an even more important government contractor. Considering that a lot of people that are prominent Palantir investors or co-founders have attached themselves in various ways, either to the Trump campaign as donors or occupying important posts in the administration. So Palantir, again, is sort of the engine that a lot of this, the surveillance state really runs on. And I think people should really educate themselves about it, especially if what I talked about earlier as it relates to predictive policing and predictive health and predicting pandemics before it happens and all of that is concerning to you. I mean, again,
right,
4 years, it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen. But I think those are pretty reliable markers we can look for. And sort of this, I think it's likely that there's going to be an increase in, biometric digital ID. Trump has sort of marketed this as a way to stop mass migration. The dialectics are different, but it's sort of a policy that's being marketed all over the world. Depending on the country, the sales pitch is different, but ultimately that policy is being marketed, and in the push into digital assets, I think, is also happening.
Webb warns against the entry of powerful financial institutions like BlackRock into the Bitcoin space, saying this is definitely a negative development in crypto. She asserts that these institutions are set to control a significant portion of the cryptocurrency supply, and emphasizes the importance of resisting this obvious influence on the market. Webb foresees a looming economic catastrophe, driven by collapsing fiat money systems, rampant inflation, and bank failures. She suggests transitioning to a Bitcoin standard might be on the horizon, as the world grapples with the impending crisis. She asserts that the promises made by the Federal Reserve and central banks have been hollow, leading to excessive money printing and a proliferation of poor investments. And with the aftermath of the recent inflation surge, Webb says this will not lead to a return to the status quo. What do you think about her prediction for Bitcoin? Comment down below. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Library of Wealth. We'll see you in the next video.